Good evening. I have the pleasure of welcoming all of you to this event of CIC. Today, the topic is an extremely interesting one and a very topical one. And to discuss this important topic, we have with us Mr. Gautam Radhakrishnan Desiraju. He has been in the solid state and structural chemistry unit of the Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore, since 2009, and since 2023 has been a distinguished visiting professor in UPES Dehradun. Prior to this, he was in the University of Hyderabad for 30 years. He has played a major role in the development and growth of the subject of crystal engineering. He is noted for gaining acceptance for the theme of weak hydrogen bonding among chemists and crystallographers. His books on crystal engineering in 1989 and 2011 and the weak hydrogen bond in structural chemistry and biology in 1999 are particularly well known. He is one of the most highly cited Indian scientists with more than 475 research papers, 80,000 plus citations, and an H index of 105. He has won international awards such as Alexander van Humboldt, I can't pronounce the rest of the name, Forschungspreis, the TWAS Award in Chemistry, and the ISA Medal for Science of the University of Bologna. He has guided the PhD work of around 35 students and mentored around 70 postdoctoral associates. He is a member of the editorial advisory boards of Chemical Communications and the Journal of the American Chemical Society. He is a former president of the International Union of Crystallography. He is a recipient of an honorary doctorate degree of the Universidad Nacional de Cordoba in Argentina, the Rayalaseema University, Kurnool, and Gulbarga University, Kalburagi. He was awarded the Acharya P.C. Ray Medal in 2015 of the University of Calcutta for innovation in science and technology. His books, Bharat, India 2.0 and Delimitation and States Reorganization, are outside the scientific domain and are concerned with the constitutional history of India and its reimagination as Bharat, a civilizational state rather than a nation state, as has been understood till now. Two forthcoming books in 2025 are India's Supply Chains in a World at War and Fixing Science in India, a Socio-Economic Prescription. Put your hands together for Professor Gautam Radhakrishna Desiraju. May I welcome you onto the stage, please, sir. In conversation with him will be yours truly. So, this is my first attempt at moderation, so please bear with me while I take you through the discussions with our eminent speaker. Please. It is a privilege to welcome you all to the discussion on delimitation and states reorganization for a better democracy in Bharat. I am delighted to be in conversation with one of the two authors, Professor Gautam Desiraju, who I have just introduced, a distinguished scientist and public thinker. It is a particularly meaningful moment for me to moderate this dialogue. As Census Commissioner for the 2011 Census of India, I've had the opportunity to work at the intersection of data, demography, and democratic institutions. And that's where this book begins, at the crossroads of numbers and nationhood. Let me start by recalling a historical truth. The flag, the census, and the map. These were fundamental tools of the colonial regime. The map divided, categorized, and administered. The census, beginning in 1871, counted and classified not just people but their religions, their castes, their languages, and tribes. Together, these instruments shaped the colonial imagination of India. But after independence, we repurposed them. We used the census to plan inclusion, to allocate resources, and to support democratic representation. And yet, one part of the legacy remains oddly frozen, which is delimitation, the periodic redrawing of electoral boundaries to reflect changing populations. Since the 42nd Amendment in 1976, India's representation structure has been locked in the mold of the 1971 census. We've added over 700 million people since then, but we haven't recalibrated how the population is represented. especially across states. And now, with the freeze set to lift after the first census conducted post 2026, we are at a constitutional and political crossroads. The book we are discussing today doesn't just call for updated numbers, it calls for a fundamental reimagination of the Union, and the authors propose reorganizing India into 75 smaller population balanced states alongside delimitation to truly honor the democratic ideal of one vote, one value, and ensure equity across the federal structure. It's a provocative idea, but also a serious one, which is rooted in history, in law, and vision. So, let me quickly give you, for those of you who haven't read this book, and believe me, I did go through it page by page, sir. A small, quick review of the book. The core arguments that the author makes is each vote should have the same value and each state should have the same heft. This is his first principle. He argues that the India's vote weight varies significantly across states due to demographic disparities and delimitation freeze. He contends that states should be more uniform in size to ensure political and economic equality, hence the proposal for 75 new states. Secondly, he argues that the linguistic state model, you would all recall that 1956 we had the State Reorganization Committee. So he critiques that and says that the linguistic state model and its dilution of local identities uh, and proposes a modular, smaller states to strengthen subsidiarity, democratic responsiveness, economic specialization, and cultural integrity. His third point is there should be a simultaneous delimitation and reorganization. A key insight is that delimitation and state reorganization must be integrated and conducted under the same legal and institutional framework, potentially by reforming the delimitation commission's remit. And lastly, he says that the constitution already enables parliament to redraw state lines and allocate seats, and thus radical reform is legally possible without a new constitutional amendment. So these are the four major themes on which the entire book revolves. Now the strengths are of this book that it traces the state formation from British India to present all the inconsistencies in the State Reorganization Committee's linguistic rationale. It's a very rich historical analysis. Of course, it's very topical, well timed. It addresses an urgent democratic movement as the delimitation freeze ends in 2026. As I mentioned earlier, the freeze has been on for, we are doing it's on the basis of the 1971 census, and this has created a lot of discrepancies, as he will point out when he talks. He doesn't stop at diagnosing flaws. He offers a detailed blueprint for smaller balanced states, reinforcing equal representation. And therefore, it's not merely pointing out the weaknesses of the system, but proposing a new paradigm which you may or may not agree, but it's an extremely thought-provoking ideas have been presented. Finally, the style he has adopted is very, very engaging and solution oriented, and very accessible style actually. Of course, there are counterpoints. The proposals that he makes are very ambitious in scale, overly radical and fraught with political practiciousness. As he says in his book, he is not addressing any political, he is giving a solution irrespective of who is in power. It's richly argued, backed by historical depth and constitutional clarity, and it stands out as a serious policy intervention rather than speculative commentary. And finally, its radicalism may deter mainstream political acceptance, but that's what he aims. A new thought process, at least there should be a debate, there should be a discussion among the people of India before any new reforms are taken up. So finally, I would conclude by saying it's a compelling and intellectually rigorous contribution to governance reform discourse. especially valuable for policymakers, constitutional scholars, and civic thinkers. Whether or not one agrees with the 75 state vision, the book effectively reframes the delimitation dilemma as a gateway to systematic regeneration of India's democracy. Appada. So, this is, I had to prepare quite a lot, sir. I hope I've covered a critique of your book and presented a fair picture. Now, before we go into the discussion, I would request you to tell us what made you write this book and the major themes that you have covered in the book so that we could set the context for the other discussions to follow.
Thank you. Mr. Chandramouli. And I would like to thank your organization for having kindly invited me this evening to have a discussion and a discourse. And yes, your description of the book is very fair. Fairness is something which we don't see much of in this country anymore. And I'm glad you also pointed out that this book, I call it my little red book. And it is actually, I would say, politically quite neutral. After you read the book, if you read it, some copies are there outside, I think. And you'll realize that the approach that I and my co author have taken is to stand a little back and look at the electoral problem that now faces us with delimitation. That is the immediate provocation. And set in a civilizational backdrop. And in a sense, this book, this delimitation book, is a sequel to the earlier book that I wrote, this yellow colored thing, Bharat India 2.0, where I am the single author, which is the first time I tried to start expressing my feelings about the inadequacy of the Constitution of India in being able to convey the spirit of the people of India in terms of how we would like to govern ourselves. Our constitution starts with the words, we the people. We are the people, all of us. In gatherings, big and small, this vast and fantastic panorama of 1.4 billion souls. I have visited probably in the course of my scientific persona, of which you will not see anything in this discussion. But in the course of my scientific work, I've visited about 35, 40, 50 countries all over the world. For basically shorter lengths of time, I would say, because 66 of my 72 years have been spent exclusively in Bharat. All my scientific work has been done in Bharat. And I have not done, I used to go abroad to talk about the work I did over here. But so I think, like all of you, we are all uniquely qualified to speak about our beloved country. The Yellow Book, it talks about Bharat India 2.0. So people ask, what is India 1.0? India 1.0 was India. In fact, there are some cynics who would say that there wasn't even an India 1.0, it was only British Empire 2.0. And the Guardian newspaper, on the day when Modi got elected, has actually written saying that May 2014 is the day when the British finally left India. So, even these comments I am making in a completely apolitical background. At the end of this discussion, I will challenge you to predict whom I will vote for in the next election. So, it is completely politically neutral, what I am saying. Because the problem with getting involved in any of these matters politically is that then the whole viewpoint, everything becomes biased towards that. What we miss in India today, there is a term for this. It's called the missing middle. Missing middle means, what is this middle? On the one hand, you have the ruling classes, who are basically our politicians, the ministers, assisted by the executive, of whom the chairman today is a wonderful example, and so many of your colleagues here, very seasoned people. But I'm sure, sir, all of you will realize that the executive, at least as represented by the administrative services and so on, they do not rule the country. The rulers are the people whom we elect.
Absolutely.
And this is inherent in a democratic republic. Democracy means that all the people, it is the rule by the people, as Lincoln said. But obviously, you cannot have 1.4 billion people sitting in Delhi and ruling the 1.4 billion. So we decide, in the interests of practicality and pragmatism, to elect a few people among us to rule on our behalf. That is republic. So democracy means rule by the people. Republic means a certain designated oligarchy actually carries out the process of ruling. And there are two types of republic. One is democracy compatible and one is democracy incompatible. So India, USA, Germany, etc., etc., we are all democracy compatible republics. China is a democracy incompatible republic. It is also a republic because even there it is ruled by an oligarchy. So one must distinguish carefully between the terms democratic and republic. But in terms of the so called countries where there are generally free and fair elections, the congruency between democracy and republic is very high. And this is the system, rightly or wrongly, that we have been following in India since 1950 when we took up this constitution. So, very briefly, coming back to the Yellow Book, what that stated was that there's something fundamentally wrong with the constitution in terms of the fact that a very simple thing, forget the rest of all those 298 articles and all that. I am sure all of us in this room, whatever be our religious persuasions, will agree that we live in a highly religious country. And both in terms of everyday life, the idioms we use, the cultural things we follow, doesn't matter which religion. But India is a highly religious country. Of that, there is no doubt, and in ways in which we can easily demonstrate. As Vivekananda said, that he said you can achieve nothing in India unless you approach it from a religious angle. For a country that is so religious, the first thing that struck me when I started reading the Constitution, and when did I start reading the Constitution? Because abruptly my lab in the IISc was closed down because of COVID. And I had to send all my postdocs away. In fact, I sent them 10 days before the Prime Minister announced the lockdown, and they wanted to know why I was sending them away. I just said there is something about this thing that I don't like. And some of my postdocs live in places very far from Bangalore. So I said, please pack up and go. Do not remain in Bangalore. Go away. They didn't know why I was doing this. But sometimes we scientists have this ability to predict, because this is one thing, sir. I don't think in the bureaucracy they teach you so much in Missouri how to predict things. But predicting things is part and parcel of our DNA as scientists. If you are a good scientist, you love to predict. You don't mind if your prediction is proved wrong. But we have to predict.
I thought you were a specialized crystallographer and not a crystal gazer.
Well, let me tell you something. If you take the original definition of crystallography by none other than Goethe, he says, he wrote this about 200 years ago. He said, never was there a subject that attracts the highest intellects in the world and yet is so useless in its applications. So crystallography teaches you when you should be precise and when you should be imprecise. And a part of any prediction is to give yourself enough what we call salt and pepper in the prediction. And so, coming back to this idea of predicting, it is innately within us. So, when I started reading this, I have to send the students away, and then what to do? I told my wife, and this is one of the very rare occasions I'm speaking where I'm lucky enough to have my wife in the audience. I don't think she's been listening to me more than maybe 10 times, 15 times in my entire innings. So it's very special for me. So I told her, what am I supposed to do here sitting in this house watching TV after 2 days? I think all of us face that problem. What to do? So then I said, I started reading this thing, and I'll also tell you why there was something, it keeps bugging you. Whenever, ladies and gentlemen, when something bugs you all the time, any of us, there's something serious in it. Otherwise, it will not keep coming back to you again and again. And the thing that was bugging me was that this 2019 election, when the BJP got 303 or some huge number, they all assembled in the Central Hall of Parliament. And Prime Minister comes out, lot of flowers, everything. And then he comes, and then there's this big book called Constitution of India. And then book is there. Book is there, and then he does this. We were watching the TV, and then I said, what's he doing? What is he doing? It's finally a book. It is not Asman Ka Kitab. It didn't fly down with Archangel Gabriel or something. Some 300 ordinary people sat down and under great time pressure they wrote that book. Okay, ordinary people means they're as ordinary as all of us. Any of us here, some random collection of people in this audience, I'll bet you money we could have done an equally good job if we were placed in that Constituent Assembly. The times from 1940 to about 1950 were extraordinary times. Ordinary people became extraordinary simply because they existed in those times. Of course, high proportion of lawyers in that group. I guess you need them as some kind of an insurance policy. No matter what you say, the lawyer will always find some other interpretation. That is their job. That's why my co-author is also a lawyer. That's my insurance policy in a sense. So they sat and wrote this, but I tell you, any intelligent, patriotic, nationalistic person, and they were all like that. And they had serious time pressures. And part of the reason our constitution, to my mind, appeared to be a little not permanent. And talking about this non permanent, Ambedkar, Patel, Nehru all said that this was only a short term interim book. They said we don't give this more than 10 years. There were a huge problem that they faced. Our country was vivisected. Bharat Varsha was no more. I want you people to think about this. Jinnah has said, he was very upset. He said, I've got a moth eaten and mutilated Pakistan. This is a well known quotation. I ask you the question. We got a moth eaten and mutilated India. Why don't we think about it in those terms? Out of my 51 Shakti Pitas, about 10 of them are in on territory which we do not control anymore. The territorial extent of Bharatvarsha was about 70,000 lakh square kilometers. Today, the political Republic of India is only 32,000 lakh square kilometers. So we have lost more than 50% of land, which at least I consider as sacred. And this brought me to the point in the Yellow Book about this whole thing becoming a civilizational state. Something where the culture, tradition, water, air, all the Panchabhutas, they form a unique pattern and tapestry which is characteristic of Bharat, India, Bharatvarsha, whatever you want to call it. It is characteristic of this and this alone. It is not any other country. And we are inheritors of something. Famous scientists like Schrödinger, Zevel, and all have said many ancient civilizations existed. This is the only one that still goes on. It goes on in some form or shape, maybe not in the original shape. So, this got me to the idea of thinking of small states. And in the interest of time, therefore, a few copies of that are also there. We can get into delimitation straight away. Because when you suddenly what happened, why did I write the second book? The first book appealed to a lot of people who saw the historical, geographical, cultural ideas of these things. They said, very nice, very nice. But then suddenly came this delimitation issue. The fact that, and as the chairman has said correctly, we are basically flouting the first principle of democracy that every vote has the same value. I live in a constituency which has the dubious distinction of being the fifth largest constituency in the country. Bangalore North has got 31 lakh eligible voters today. Some of you live in one of the smaller constituencies in Tamil Nadu, and that is Chennai Central, which has only 13 lakh eligible voters. The area around Central Station, Ripon Building, etc. So a person who votes in Chennai Central, his vote is worth double my vote. So I am, in a sense, if you take Article 14 of the Constitution, I am being penalized simply because I live in Bangalore North, for nothing else. Because whether it is Chennai Central or Bangalore North, both of us are sending one member to the Lok Sabha. My vote in sending my MP should be the same as the weight of the vote of the person in Chennai Central. It is not so. And we are talking here about highly urban areas. Let us not get into the, you know, places which are geographically very different. Last night, chairman knows that I had a very exciting journey coming from Mandi, high up there in the mountains, to Chennai. So when you go to a place like Mandi and all that, obviously those some of those constituencies will be small because so few people live there anyway. And to go from one hut to the next hut is 2 kilometer trek. So you can't compare some of those sparsely populated areas. But if you take other areas, there should be more semblance of parity between the votes cast. Now, why do I say there should be the parity? The issues of, say, the constituents in Chennai Central will get a disproportionate amount of hearing in the Lok Sabha compared to the issues in Bangalore North, simply because we are more in number. And this is then brings you to the next big issue. I'm not planning on giving a description of the whole book. For those who are interested, the copies of the book are there, and my own contribution to the cause. I've given each of you this pink sheet with the common questions, which strike many people when they think about delimitation. Now, the answers to those questions are given in the sealed brown paper envelopes. So, those who buy the book will get one brown paper envelope. And you will also get my signature on the book. So, these are my answers. They may be different from your answers.
If I can just intervene, sir. He makes a comparison between US, Japan, Germany. He
Correct.
says that number of voters per seat is about 5.86 in US, 2.28 in Japan, 0.83 in Germany, etc., etc. And India is about 17.86 lakh. This is the average of number of voters per seat
So, very
in lakhs. So this is what
page
he.
number enna, sir?
This is page 113.
Page 113 le pata, then you can see there when India started off its journey as a republic, we had about 3 lakh voters per constituency. Today, the average is 17 lakhs, with Bangalore North being 31. There's one big boss of this, Malkajgiri, outside Secunderabad, that is some 36 or 37 lakhs. How that constituency was allowed to become so big, only the good Lord knows. So, if you, some of the solutions proposed in this book, the number of voters per constituency will come down to a more manageable 10 lakhs. It will still not be as good as, actually, sir, I would say that 543 is a very small number for Lok Sabha. They say it could be 858 or something, simply because they counted the number of chairs in the new Lok Sabha, and that's all, nothing else. I feel the number should be closer to 1500. Because if it is more than 1500, all of us, voters, will have a chance to see our member of parliament. Today, it's impossible. Even if you want to, you cannot meet your MP. And then it results in all sorts of other distortions. So, going through the book, the construct of the book. Chapter 1 is all about democracy itself. And there's a big question today about whether India is a democracy or not. All these Washington Post, New York Times, all these funny fellows, Tukade gang, or it's not even a democracy. So they say it is a only Western democracy is democracy. Sandeep Balkrishna says that it has to be Christianized democracy to be a democracy. And further, it should be Protestant Christianized democracy to be a democracy. Democracy means rule by the people. It has to flow from the nature of the people themselves. We cannot run our democracy based on the priorities of somebody else in some other country. Today, there is serious discussion. The American Constitution also starts with the words "we the people." And there is serious commentary, ladies and gentlemen, today that what Jefferson, Franklin, Washington, and all meant when they said "we the people," they meant we the white people. This is what is being seriously spoken about today. This is not rhetorical stuff meant for Twitter and Twitter Maharajas and great sir, and all that. Not like that. They're saying all this now. So, and this is another difference between civilizational states and what we call nation states. And we've written about nation states in both the books, but it's a peculiarly European construct, which had not much to do with our history, culture, background. And the difference between these nation states and civilizational state is that in a nation state, the behavior of the people flows from the constitution. The constitution is the blueprint, and the people go by the constitution. The civilizational state is exactly the opposite. The constitution flows from the nature of the people. And that is what our 1950 constitution failed to do. Fully 260 or so of the 390 articles are direct copy paste from the Government of India Act 1935, which was a document, the last major British legislation in the Indian Empire. And it is a blueprint for how a colony should be ruled by the colonizers. So when two-thirds of the document is copy paste from that, I know and I'm well aware that you and your colleagues from the administrative service have studied this adequately in your various training and so on. That Ambedkar actually said, he was asked to defend, then he said it has to do with procedural aspects, it is not to do, and that is why he defended fundamental rights, part 3. So,
But I think the main argument you're making is it's not a sacred book, the Constitution, and it has been amended about 105 times, and therefore you argue very strongly that it is something, treating it as a basic structure is inviolable, as should go, and we should amend the Constitution as per the current needs of the
of
people.
people,
This is what
exactly,
you are
that is
saying.
what it is. And also the fact that amend, he says, is amending a better way since we've already had 104 of these amendments? Or is it easier and more practical to start afresh? Because all countries, major democracies like Germany, France, etc., have completely rewritten their constitutions many times. It's not something that is peculiar to us. Anyway, so that is chapter 1. Chapter 2, since I want to stick with the delimitation, is how we got our present states. This 28 plus 8, 8 union territories, 28 states. How did they come? The more you read, you realize that they came due to no reason at all. They were, you see, you had British provinces, which were all very huge, and they were designed by the British only for their peculiar economic enterprise, which is a colonial enterprise. So you have Madras presidency, all the way from Mangalore to Srikakulam or something. No such entity of such a large size, will last. The British did it in a particular way for their own purposes. So we were less stuck with that. Then you had the 546 princely states. And thanks to Sardar, they all came into our booty. Using various political stratagems, which he did, no doubt about it. He is a politician. And he is like any other politician. And the inside story about how all these 546 came to us itself is a fascinating story. I think Sanjeev Chopra's book, a good friend of mine, by the way. And
Good batchmate of ours.
okay, he organized a similar function for me in Valley of Words, and where one of your colleagues, Mr. Ravishankar, was sitting in the chair which you are sitting here today. So,
No, sir, could you just enlighten the audience about the failings of the State Reorganization Committee and the linguistic basis on which states were reorganized?
correct. I think this is one of the major things. So we had this British India, then we had this princely states, and there is one group C states also, some Delhi,
Chief
Ajmer,
Commissioner
chief
states.
commissioner states, all sorts of, see, all the bureaucracy, these British fellows, all kinds of things they did to suit their immediate purposes. So it was known even then, and that is why Article 3 was written the way it was written. Because Article 3 is a very simple and very powerful article. It says that the central legislature, namely the Rajya Sabha and the Lok Sabha, have the power to make states. They can make states, they can dissolve states, they can make a state into a union territory, they can make a union territory into a state by a simple majority, not even special majority with the two-thirds and all. No. Simple majority in Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha is enough to, because they knew they had to do it quickly. So then we had a couple of things. We give some case studies, Andhra and Orissa and so on. Orissa from the pre-independence days, and Andhra and how this Potti Sri Ramulu death and all that suddenly caused a very strange non-linear diversion to the whole thing. And then came the idea of linguistic states. I would say that if there is one feature of this red book which would probably determine if it has a long shelf life or not, it's still too early to tell. I mean, Bharat has lasted now 4 years and it's still selling very well. So we'll have to see how this does. That's another nice thing about I found about writing books. They said I wrote some 450 papers and all that, scientific papers. Scientific papers, they're very nice because you submit them, some unknown people called referees see the papers and then they comment about it and then it gets published. So the referee reports come before publication. In a book, the referee reports come after publication. Nobody sees this before I send it to the publisher and say what it is. So anytime an author of a book puts a book, you're wondering a little, what will the referees say? And so it gives me a different perspective on this whole publication matter. But coming back to linguistic states, the linguistic state idea, believe me, ladies and gentlemen, was exclusively a creation of the British in terms of their divide and rule policy. And I think we will do well to know that the first place where this, I call it a canker in our democracy, it started with Odisha. Because the British, in their original Bengal presidency, which was the largest of their presidencies, which included all of today's West Bengal, all of Bangladesh, all of Assam and the Northeast, all of Bihar, and all of Odisha, and little bits of what is today northernmost Andhra Pradesh. All this was the old Bengal presidency. And the British had a thing that their government jobs which they gave, India was impoverished by 1858. And the only way in which anybody could make a living was to get a Sarkari Naukri. They said that you have to know Bengali to get a government job in Bengal presidency. So you see, right from the beginning, all the entire lot of people who don't speak Bengali, they are then alienated.
You make the point, sir, that the SRC recommendation, the State Reorganization Committee's recommendations, were themselves not for linguistic states.
Absolutely correct. In fact, I'll share a small episode with you. Dr. B.R. Ambedkar wrote a small pamphlet in 1955 called Thoughts on Linguistic States or something like that. It's not more than 20-30 pages. It's a pamphlet in the end, where he bitterly opposed this idea of linguistic states because he said it is the cause, it is going to be the cause of ruination of this country. And he said very pithy words: one state, one language. In other words, given any state, all the people in that state should speak only one language. He said that is correct. The converse, he said, is very wrong. Namely, one language, one state. That means all the people who speak a particular language must belong to one state. That is the idea of the linguistic state. And he wrote this at the time of the Panikkar State Reorganization Commission. It's another long story why the central government did not accept all the recommendations of Panikkar also. But they were very scared of this Ambedkar's short pamphlet. And I'll share our own experience. We got to know about this pamphlet quite indirectly. And then when we tried to start searching for it, we could not find it. We could not find it anywhere. And then I told my co author who lives in Delhi, I said, go to the National Archives. He went there and then he found an old, dusty physical copy, single thing there was there in that National Archives. So we pulled that thing out from there, and that's where we saw all the things that Ambedkar had. He clearly foresaw the North South problem.
In fact, I could share with you that language data in the census is still a very sensitive topic, which is not allowed to be cleared unless cleared by the cabinet subcommittee.
See? They didn't want, see, obviously we are outsiders. We are only privy to public domain information. But it looks like the government of the day did not want Ambedkar's pamphlet to be even known by anybody. And his words are very, very cutting and precise.
So, just developing on this theme that you have just introduced, that the SRC and linguistic basis for the reorganization of states was not a very sound thing, and you suggest a different concept of 75 states. Could you unpack that idea for us? Apart from the size, you have also dwelt at length on the linguistic composition of these states, etc. Could you just unpack that idea of 75 states? What is the significance of 75? Why 75?
75. 75, for a start, is a number that is greater than 28.
Okay.
So, 28 is inadequate. It could be 50, it could be 65. A reliable person has told me that there are people today in our country who are considering 84. So, the general idea is that one can move to a smaller state size. The primary reason is administrative convenience. I think so many administrators in the audience, smaller states are easier to administer. The most glaring example of this is Uttar Pradesh, where successive people, Mayawati, Yogi Adityanath, when he was just a rookie member of parliament 20 years ago, they have all talked about this. Uttar Pradesh is a special case because the politicians have now realized that if they capture the electoral thing in Uttar Pradesh, it's a shortcut to the prime ministership. So Nehru captured it in the 50s, and the BJP has captured it now. So, as Machiavelli said, you cannot expect people who are benefiting from a particular system to want to change that system. It is in their vested interest to keep it going, which is why, again, the missing middle is important, because the politicians ain't going to do this. Now they are forced to do it because of this north south problem. Now they have come, the water has come up to here for them. Because there is no scientific way. Professor Murli Manohar Joshi, who wrote the foreword for this book, whom incidentally I have known for great many years, but not politically. I know him as a senior professor of physics, and he knows me as a youngster who's coming up as a professor of chemistry somewhere. And talking about crystallography, I could say that Professor Joshi himself is a PhD student of one of our greatest crystallographers of the 1930s, Professor Kedareshwar Banerjee, and who did work in the 1930s that subsequently got people like Karl and Hauptmann to get the Nobel Prize in 85. And Banerjee's paper in Nature in 1931 still stands today. So, I mean, when I talked to Professor Joshi recently, he yelled at me about something. He said that you're writing articles in useless places. So I said, what to do, sir? So he said, look, there are very few people who can shout at you today. I am one of them, so I'm shouting at you. So were greatly benefited by his forward. And then he mentioned some of the issues that were coming up in this delimitation linguistic states. And he said it was one of the biggest blunders that we committed. And because then, see, after Potticherry, that's why I said that non-linear thing. Nehru was not for giving Andhra Pradesh. And suddenly this gentleman going and dying in the fast. The next day he gave the state. And the other thing let me say about Tamil Nadu. Madras presidency was not a linguistic state. Tamil Nadu was not a linguistic state. It defaulted into becoming a linguistic state because the Telugus went. And the craziest situation, at the time when Andhra was created, there were more Telugu speaking people than the Tamil speaking people here. And so this is a strange situation where the majority wanted to go away. I mean, can you think about things like this? I think it's for us to sort of sometimes look back upon history and wonder what were all these people doing? And exactly, did they realize the long term implications of what? And after this becomes like this, then Maharashtra, Gujarat, the Bombay presidency. As it is, they removed Sindh in 1928, that is the British Badmashi. Now, then Maharashtra, Gujarat. Yesterday, we find that because the Thane municipal corporation elections are going to be held soon, all these Thakres and Fadnavis all are saying Marathi Manus, Marathi Manus. So the language problem only comes up when there is an election somewhere. Telugus don't hate Tamil speaking people. My wife and I come from families where Tamil and Telugu are freely spoken and understood. Nobody hates anybody. I mean, Maharashtrians don't hate Hindi. Hindi speaking people couldn't care less about who speaks Marathi or who speaks Gujarati. Language finally is only a means of communication. I have visited villages in the Alps on either side of the mountain where I was told by my hosts that the language spoken on one side of the mountain is not even understandable to the people who's on the other side of the mountain. And they have lived like this for 1,000 years like this. So language is merely a convenience. It was
No,
never a marker of identity. And this comes, you have mentioned in your introduction about the micro identities. The micro identities which are there in the 75 states are true identities, because one of the fellows, E Samskriti or someplace where we have written that we have produced a dharmic solution to delimitation.
no, but would you call it? Would you agree that the book is more about state reorganization first
Yes,
and delimitation next?
yes.
And would you then invert?
Delimitation problem gets solved automatically. Because you see, if you take a 2 crore, we are saying 75 states, 2 crore each population, 150 crore is the population of India. Now, if you have 2 crore population and you do delimitation, then delimitation de novo can be done.
So, exactly. So, the basic premise of your book then is that first create smaller states and then within that delimit the constituencies.
Yes, only if you make smaller states, you will satisfy the twin conditions of each vote same value and each state same heft.
So, when we go ahead on the practical, now the census has been announced for 2027 and we have the delimitation freeze ending in 2026.
Correct.
So, what do you think would be the strategy which will be followed in this case? Would you foresee in your crystal ball whether we are going to have another freeze for another 10 years or where are we heading?
You are clearly the most competent person in this room to talk about the logistics of doing the census. And presumably it's going to start next year and end in 27 or something.
27.
27 end, we will be done with the census. Let us also ignore, because it is not the main issue, that whether the caste census will be there or not, but I think it will be there.
It will be
It
there.
will be there. But it doesn't concern this issue directly. So we know how many people live in this country. And
No,
since you ask me, excuse me,
yeah.
my great fear is that they will do the census correctly. Obviously, they have to, and there is no political thing involved in doing a wrong census. They will, although this comment has been made by some commentators that the number of Hindus in this country is systematically underestimated through voluntary declaration itself. Whereas the number of Muslims in this country is systematically overestimated again because of voluntary declaration. Nothing that the government is doing. So there is apparently some slight distortion in the numbers of people, but let us say that we will be about 1.4, 1.5 billion. Some number like that we will get, of which about 60% will be eligible voters. Now, my fear at this point is that since the government is not yet ready, people who ought to count have already read this book, and they have read it so that the covers have come off. They have also read that book. So they know that this is a major issue which has a clean solution. The problem here again is the clean solution is only possible if the North Indian states which are underrepresented and the South Indian states that are overrepresented are able to make common cause in the overall interest of Bharat. There is simply no way
But the
in which the 1971 numbers can continue in perpetuity in the South.
No, but the argument here is the numbers are the number of seats. It is not the number of persons who are represented by that seat.
Exactly.
And therefore, by having more numbers in the parliament, they have greater heft than states which are sending lesser number
Exactly.
and would face even lesser numbers because they have done well in the population.
Yes. Even there is a fallacy that
But your
Pe-
argument is different.
yeah, that is different. And for example, the argument is made that people in the south uh, uh, followed family planning and therefore they became rich. Actually, the opposite is true. If you become rich, you will follow family planning. And I think that is Indira Gandhi purposely. She had her own reasons to put the freeze. Let's not get into Mrs. Gandhi and the
No,
many
will
things
the
that she did.
question which I asked you was, will the freeze be extended because the census figures are not going to be available by 2026?
I feel that is the case. What they may do is something even worse than that. Forget the freeze. They'll just take the 543 seats today. Huh. The new number of chairs is 758, no? 758 divided by 543, some number will come, like Trump produces his numbers like that. So they will produce one fraction and they will say that the total number of seats will be so much. It will solve no problem, it will just make it worse. I mean, this is my great fear because, quite frankly, sir, we don't have the time to do all this now. We had to, I mean, suppose you say 75 states, and readers of the book will also know that, see, I'm not some mathematician or a scientist to ruthlessly just come and put numbers. We've got two states here that are very big. One is called Mithila and one is called Kashi, which is about 5 to 6 crore population each. And we have given detailed justification in this book why we are keeping these, still continue to keep these states a bit big. And in an audience that is, I would say, maybe more than 90% plus South Indians, I will still say that given my readings and my study of Bharat, Mithila and Kashi in Bharatvarsha, they are the crucible of our whole civilization. Everything that has happened in Bharatvarsha, you can trace its origin somewhere in that eastern UP, western Bihar region. It is, I call it the crucible of the whole civilization itself. While originally it started in places which are now today's Afghanistan, NWFP, that Khyber Pakhtunkhwa and all that. When things came out from there into the Sindhu and Ganga Yamuna, I think it reached its real zenith. So, which is why these states have been peculiarly kept big. They are the only two states that are so big, by the way. We somehow didn't feel that we had any cause or justification to cut them simply because we want to make them all equal sizes and things like that. So we've also used a bit of discretion. I am not a purely a scientist when I wrote this book because scientists will, like King Solomon's baby, he'll go on cutting, without paying any heed to anything at all. So we've not done that. And I will also say that we've had a fair deal of feedback and interaction. There was a very interesting podcast in English and Bengali that my co-author gave to a very nice channel called College Street Calcutta. And I would ask you people to listen to that one. Would you believe that the vast majority of Bengalis are in favor of our formula to divide Bengal into four states? And they have said that the domination of Calcutta in the whole discourse of Bengal itself has been very unhealthy. And these are thinking people who are talking. So we've got what we call Gouda, which is the Calcutta area, and then we've got Mallabhum, which is the Kharagpur area, which actually correctly belongs to central India, doesn't belong to Bengal at all. And then we've got the Kamtapur, which is the Chicken Neck area, which is the Muslim majority. And then we have completely removed this whole farce of North Bengal. And we call it a new state called Indrekil, which involves the Darjeeling, parts of Bhutan, parts of Sikkim, etc., where people are of Nepalese, Bhutanese, Tibetan origin, not Bengali origin. So I think we have paid some respect to local sentiments. And this is where the micro identities are so very important. Calcutta, if you look at the map, is very far away. It's 600-700 kilometers from Darjeeling. And they have no concept or idea as to what's happening. So it is not that people are hidebound or they believe in Asman Ka Kitab and all that. They are thinking. Bengalis are thinking. I was surprised to see the number of people who were in the audience, mostly from Calcutta, saying that the domination of Calcutta in the discourse in Bengal is totally artificial. And so, in each of these cases, we have found, I mean, personally, I'll say that I have had a fascinating journey into this lovely country of ours without actually having been to all those places myself. Some I have seen, but when you realize that there is so much here that is hidden, which we as responsible citizens should start thinking about, reading about, telling our children and grandchildren that, hey, this is the country you really belong to. And in a apolitical, more intellectual kind of a thing, because we're all educated people in this audience, to try to see how these things and final mathematical thing which Professor Joshi also pointed out. He said that, and this is also the take home lesson, each vote same value, each state same heft can only be obtained with 75 small states. No other way can
So
you solve both these problems.
on that note, sir, if we can take some questions from the audience. To summarize, he has one, that the linguistic organization of states was not scientific, and therefore we need to have other criteria for forming states. States are too big or uneven, and therefore there is a need for more number of states with more balanced population. And for that, he has given a number of ideas to actually put it into operation. So, with this, I would request the audience, if you have a question, just raise your hand. Please make it a question, not a statement. Yes, sir. The mic will come to you, sir. The gentleman there is.
Do you do,
Go ahead.
do you feel that the states can be also restructured in terms of near equal resources for people in different junctions?
By junctions, what do you mean?
See, like you have mountains and water bodies and
Correct.
plains. If each state is resourced to have roughly equal, so each will get water resources roughly equal and also able to put factories wherever required, have equal amount of greenery so that the nature also is compensated.
Please go to the yellow book.
Yeah.
This entire thing is given there.
Okay.
So the basis for the division of 75 states is also economic.
Yeah.
And the one of the sections in the red book
Yes.
calls it 75 economic powerhouses.
Yeah.
And at the cost of repeating myself, and probably in the confidence that many of you have not heard me before, I have what is called the 4Ks. And these are the examples we give are the 4 economic powerhouses which we will generate. And my 4Ks, all the state names start with K: Kashmir, Kutch, Kongu, and Kashi. Let me explain. If you go to Kashmir, just the valley part, not Jammu, it's a very small area, very densely populated, and highly fertile. And Kashmir, in my scheme, as a small state, can become a world leader in a very esoteric product, and that is rose and lavender oil. Now, you may say, what is this peculiarity about rose and lavender oil? This rose and lavender oil is an essential ingredient of a very high value perfumery industry throughout the world. France was the leader in this about 150 years ago. Gradually, over the last 100 years, a small country in Southeast Europe, Bulgaria, got to such a high level of quality control and manufacture that they even threw the French out of the business. Bulgaria today is the world leader in rose and lavender oil. The climate in Kashmir and Bulgaria are the same. And if you go to Kashmir, if you go to the valley, you will see that lavender grows wild. It doesn't need water also. And we have made some tentative attempts at doing this rose and lavender oil, but it is done in what we can very kindly call some jugaad style. The price of Kashmir lavender oil is only about 1/20th the Bulgarian oil price. simply because we don't have quality control. So when you have a small state like Kashmir, the population will even be less than 2 crores. And you make this agriculture department as a dominant department. You must not tell Kashmiris now you put a blast furnace there. So one size does not fit all. So if you do that, you can beat Bulgaria in its own game. Similarly, similar arguments. Kutch. Kutch can become the producer of solar energy for the whole India. It's got sunshine, no rain, no people live there. It is much, much bigger than Israel, which is the leader today. Because simply Kutch has got more area than Israel. And arguably less chance of warfare and other things. It's reasonably safe. So Kutch can become the solar energy capital of India. We can even export energy from Kutch. Kongu, we all know, Manchester of the East. And already it is in a very competitive position with the satellite city of Tirupur in terms of garments, fabrics, etc. And we can just beat Bangladesh just like that. As it is, Bangladesh is sinking in its own problems. It doesn't require too much of imagination to think how this small Congo area can become bigger than Manchester in 1850. It is not difficult. And finally, my last example, Kashi. Kashi is the home of two major religions, Buddhism and Hinduism. Today we are going to Vatican City in Rome. I'll pay some 500 rupees to get some 2 euros to buy one cheap made in China imitation of some saint's picture. Same thing we can do in Kashi and make it a tourism capital of India. And also the relation is very close to Sarnath. So if you take Sarnath, Kashi and all those places, one must think in terms of making it like some Disneyland. I will use this word because finally today in the modern world it is only about the money. And so if you have 75, there is a section, please read it, called 75 economic powerhouses. We can beat 75 countries of the world. How did that Vatican become so rich? Huh? So that they're able to control geopolitical events all over the world even today. Read that book called God's Bankers. Our God is sitting there in Kashi. He is our banker tomorrow. We have to recognize him as a banker and not as a God. I think that is the challenge that, we modern Indians or modern looking Indians have to look at all this. Please,
Can we
sir.
take this question, sir, right in front? Yeah.
Is it all right if I remain seated when I
Yes,
ask my
sir.
question?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thanks.
Please.
Thanks. No, I used to work for the engineering service in the Indian Railways. I have observed the Indian Railways being reorganized into various zonal units. The time I joined the railways, there were only 7 units, 7 zonal railways. Now there are more than double that number. Now, every one of these reorganization steps involved extreme difficulty in every way. I mean, I used to be the engineer in charge at the time, say, I used to find that it is so difficult having to reorganize a whole set of new general managers, new heads of departments, and so on. Have you bestowed any thought on how this reorganization will be done over a period of time? Where are you going to find the funds for? And how are we going to avoid all disturbances
Yes.
to various families and people and so
Yes,
on?
yes.
Have you given in thought to
Yes,
that?
indeed.
Yes.
I think
Can I add something to the same question so that you answer it together? Something really radical. Like the point that he is making, as it is with about 25 states, we are fighting between the states. When you make it 75, it's going to increase. Why not look at the European Union model? Have 6 major countries within north, south, central, east, west, and the northeast. And within that, let them organize the way they want. Delimitation, whatever has to be done. And the defense will be like NATO or the central thing, etc., etc. So essentially adding one more layer. Is that an alternative?
I'll take both questions together. I make it very clear in the yellow book, and it is referred to indirectly in the red book, that the Westminster system of first past the post elections and an overlap between basically the executive and the legislature is a system that is particularly ill suited to the civilizational nature of Bharat. We took the Westminster system. Ambedkar was a great fan of the American system. And one of the things we have asked for in the Yellow Book is that we must go for a full separation between executive and legislature so that we do not have any more 75 chief ministers and 75 traffic jams. You know, yeah, we live in an area where all these characters live in the Siddaramaya and Parameshwara and all these fellows. Suddenly, all the police are all standing and then somebody is coming. Otherwise, the whole thing will be all like a jungly wangly. So, we won't have all that. So, we have a directly, each of these 75, 2 crore population will elect a CEO and he has the executive powers. The legislature, they will have state legislatures also, will have the legislative powers. And I don't know whether this is true or not, but people say that when you have a full separation like this, the likelihood of corruption may become less. I don't want to commit myself on this. But one of the things that will certainly happen, which has happened today, because of that Rajiv Gandhi's 1985 anti-defection uh, act, is I pity the BJP MP today who is not a minister because he has absolutely no work. And so hence this mad craze to become ministers. Because unless they become minister, they basically nobody will even look at their faces because they can't even debate in parliament because of the anti-defection thing. So to start with, when you say 5 or 6, I could only ask, on what basis will you take 5 or 6? Because there is a very sound organic basis for 75. And as the earlier gentleman has asked, there's an economic basis, there's a cultural basis. There are some linguistic states in my scheme, like Tulu Nadu. And there is a strong demand. The popularity of that Kantara movie, across all sections of the people all over the country, means that people, micro diversity pleases you emotionally. And the overall feeling of being Bharatiya will take you to a patriotism at a national level. I think in the middle, this linguistic is some awkward thing in the middle. Coming to your question, sir, I think partly this reorganization thing, it will involve tremendous amount of things, which is why I've told sir earlier that cannot be done in 2 years, 3 years. But if you ask me a realistic thing, which I have come to also in discussing with people who ought to know better, is that by about 2031, 2032, all these things will become a reality in this country because the Overton window has shifted sufficiently now. So that whether it is groups in the north or people in the south, I strongly believe that the people of India are of a much higher caliber than have been our rulers over the last 80 years. We deserve more. We deserve better. And considering them, I've seen Indian scientists, I've seen people of Indian origin all over the world. There is nothing wrong with us here. Nothing. In fact, we may be slightly better than some of the people because again I feel that our scriptures, the holy books, the way in which logic is delineated, it's a very complex structuring. No religious thing in the world will have 6 different ways of looking at the same truth. There itself, we realize that there could be many ways of looking at the same thing and all are equally valid. So, this kind of broad mindedness which we have in our culture and our system, today, in this book that is coming out, India's supply chains in a world at war, which will come out in, I think my publisher tells me it will be roughly September or October. India's supply chains in a world at war. We talk here about India being one of 4 empires of the future: India, China, Russia, America. And we in India or in Bharat have a uniquely different perspective that we can bring to economic affairs, where we don't have friends or we don't have enemies, but we just have our own economic interests. And finally, in the end, let me say, it's not politics. Everything is economics in the end. It is only economics that decides this, that, linguistic states, whatever.
We have a question there, sir.
My question is, have you thought through, if you have large number of states, 75, 85, whatever, what kind of an impact will it have on what we understand now as center-state relationship?
Yes.
And what kind of a role will the center play, and how much delegation there will be to the states, uh, or whether it can work in the current scenario of center-state relationships?
I'm glad this topic has come up because it is something that has seized my imagination for a long time. No, the present system is not good for what we want. The goal of 75 states, and why I want a separation of legislature and executive, and why I want a greater emphasis on economy rather than anything else, is that in an ideal civilizational dispensation, people have asked, how is a civilizational state going to be governed? In an ideal civilizational dispensation, the center must be politically strong. The states must be economically strong. Most of our daily concerns, most of our worries, tomorrow I want to be able to go to the hospital and get treated at what I feel is a reasonable price and not get gouged by somebody whom I have to go to because I cannot go to some other hospital. I am more interested in that than worried about what Bilawal Bhutto is telling Donald Trump. So, my concerns are at the state level. The state needs money in order to govern properly. Today, what has happened is the center has become overly economically powerful. Overly. And the states have also developed undesirable extent of political power, especially West Bengal, Tamil Nadu, and Maharashtra. In a recent podcast, somebody asked me, which are the 5 states or how many of the states you want that can cause serious disruption to the present model that we are operating in, whatever this may be. So I said, without batting an eyelid, I said Bengal, Tamil Nadu, Maharashtra, Kerala, Punjab. Bad. All these 5 will affect in the long run. I'm not talking about the present political leaders or Annamalai or this or that. No, I'm not talking about even individuals or the way in which the system is organized today with these lopsided states and this and that. I said, these are the 5 states. And somebody asked me also, just I think to tease me, what about your Karnataka? I said, no, I don't think it will. It doesn't have the propensity to create long-term disturbance for the whole union. I said, I somehow don't feel so. But here my opinion is as good as yours. But you've actually hit it on the head. This present dispensation, whatever is this present dispensation, it has to undergo some kind of a restructuring. And since we Indians, again because of poverty, we tend to be incrementalist in nature. We don't like disruption. Any country that needs to go forward must have an intelligent balance between incrementalism and disruptionism. You can't have 100% this or 100% that. I've just come here. He knows the history of my journey to Chennai. I was sitting in a selection committee in one of these prestigious places. The amount of incrementalism that goes into deciding even something simple, like who should be appointed as an assistant professor, it is amazing. Then I ask myself, why are we so fearful? Fearful about what? And yes, people are fearful in a poor society. And it is a scarcity economy that has made us fearful and cautious. But gradually, we have come to the point where we are not rich, but we are not that poor also anymore. So, somewhere, this mental recalibration and more confidence in ourselves as a group of people, I think it's a matter of time. I think it is moving forward. But I think once again, I'm thankful to you for bringing this point, because this is something that many concerned citizens are asking today. Like, who are we? Where are we? Where are we going? Is it all okay, or is it going to be okay, or is it going to be totally bad? I think these are all genuine questions that you have.
So we have a last question from the person at the last.
Sir, good evening, sir. Once the delimitation topic has come, we just saw the statements like increase the population. Those are the statements were given by the chief ministers. So how do you see it going to have the impact on the women empowerment? The first question. And the other thing is, ultimately the states which are doing good in resource management and economic wise is as you said, once the person is getting rich, they think about birth control. So ultimately, the states which are doing good is getting having the getting affected when it comes the number of MP seats. How do you see this disparity?
I see no problem in having more people, so long as they are all good citizens and they are productive citizens. A bigger population is always an advantage for a country. It is, in fact, today you see in China what has happened because of their demographic dividend has gone down so badly. And you see what's happening in Europe. The problems of Europe are because they don't have enough people. So as a result, they're having to completely rework their very nature. And tomorrow, UK, after 10 years, it might become an Islamic Republic of UK. Simply because they've run out of people. So it is only Europe has become a place where rich Indians and rich Chinese can go and do sightseeing and tourism. It's practically like that now. Did you see the thing that the German ministry has said? We want Indians of all types, shapes, sizes, anything we want. Please come. And they have also discovered some virtues in us that I didn't know myself. They said Indians are able to learn German very quickly. So you see, I have no problem with having more people. But this is not a solution to the delimitation problem.
You had a question, sir? Last question.
Yes. Sir, I have got some common sense based question to you, sir, that after listening to your erudite and scholarly presentation on this very not much discussed topic on delimitation. I made to understand that by virtue of going by your hypothesis of having 75 states, will a large city like Delhi, Bombay, Calcutta, Madras, and Bangalore become states by itself? Number one. Please answer, sir.
Very nice. In the Bharat book, the particular city that I considered very seriously is the city of Mumbai, where I grew up, which was called Bombay in those days. So I was sorely tempted to make it a city state. I thought and thought and thought. And then I said, it's not a Maharashtrian city. It's not an Indian city. It's a world city.
Yes.
And so what I did there in the map, if you look at the map in Bharat, is that I took a narrow strip coming from Mumbai, going all the way up to Ratnagiri, and I called it Konkan. Because then I said that this Konkan area will be the feeder, economic feeder, into the growth of Mumbai. And that Bombay itself needs a breathing space. finally it is an island. And the limitations of being an island are always going to be there. So, with regards to city states, you are reading my thoughts because one of the books that is not mentioned but is probably I'm going to sign a contract on that is the whole problem. The title roughly will be Mega Cities and Their Mega Problems. And there is a direct connection between these mega cities and delimitation. Because what has happened now is that rural populations have fled into these mega cities. The mega cities are unable to manage the civic amenities that are needed for a population of this size. And there is a dictum in urban planning which is there for decades all over the world. Apparently, the optimum size of a city where you can manage good conveniences with good administration is about 6 million people. If it is less than 6 million, apparently you don't have enough vim and vigor to generate all the facilities that you want. And if you have many more than 6 million, you're not able to cope up anymore. So we must move towards a era where we reverse this population drift, because if we're able to reverse, partly the delimitation issue will also be solved.
Yeah, part two of my question is this.
No, I think I said last. Okay.
No, I said
You can carry on the conversation, sir is here.
Yes, I will.
So please do that.
Thank you.
I don't want more people walking out, So thank you, sir, for a very thought-provoking conversation. This book and this dialogue forces us to confront questions that are both constitutional and moral. Who gets to be heard in our democracy? Do all votes carry equal weight? Can we imagine a union that is not bound by the accidents of colonial cartography but shaped by principles of equity and participation? These are the questions you have really raised. And someone who has lived through the census from the inside, I can say this much. Data tells us that India is becoming what India is becoming. But unless that data is translated into structures of representation, it remains just a number. So what you propose, as many people in the audience said, is not easy, but probably it is necessary, and perhaps it is time at least to talk about such ideas, to think about such ideas, and ideate in forums like these so that public opinion forms and we are able to move towards that ideal state, which definitely we all agree is not so ideal at present. Thank you very much, sir, for giving us this very thought-provoking book, and I would recommend you to get a copy and go through it, because whether you agree with it or not, there are views in this which are new. And this is not the same solutions, because I've taken part in several debates like this on delimitation, and it's always around the number of seats. Nobody has gone beyond the number of seats. Population, seats, we are better at population control, therefore we are losing seats, and because we are losing seats, we are losing heft. Now, this argument has not been taken in this book. It's a different argument, and I'm sure you would appreciate that such dialogues and discussions are the need of the hour, and CIC is the platform which provides such discussions. It's a spa for the mind. Thank you for coming, and can we have the next few events, please? We have a packed program in July. We have the 11th of July. We have Rebirth of the Leadership Revolution. On 19th of July, we have Demystifying the AI Revolution. And on 26th of July, we have a discussion on Money Doesn't Grow on Trees. Hope to see all of you then. And thank you for coming.